President, I thank my colleague from Alaska, Senator Sullivan, for the words that he just presented to us here, hitting the nail right on the head. And along with our colleague from South Dakota, I want to add my voice to what has been said here. As chairman of the Joint Economic Committee, we pay a lot of attention to the state of the economy. We're presented with numbers and facts about where we are as a nation. And where we are as a nation is a refrain that's becoming all too familiar, and that is we really are at a stagnant position, not going anywhere. Of all the statistics that come to us, two stand out here just recently. One is the fact that the April jobs report was about half of what it needs to be in order to provide meaningful jobs for Americans that are searching for those jobs, trying to move from the part-time jobs that they may be able to secure to full-time permanent jobs, to put some certainty into their life. Just 160,000 jobs in April, basically what covers those that are retiring, and even less than that, but certainly not a number of new jobs that give any indication whatsoever of growth in the economy. That was disappointing. A number, obviously the Wall Street paid attention to it. Hopefully that won't be repeated, but it is a worrying signal that we are not creating the kind of dynamic growth economy that will put our out-of-work individuals across this country back to work, that will provide opportunities for our young people coming out of graduation here from college and high school this month and next month. Nowhere near the number of jobs that we need to even reach, as my colleague from Alaska said, an average growth rate over the years. If you measure back through all the way to the end of World War II and going forward, I think the number is we've had about 8 or 9 major recessions. Out of each of those recessions, the recovery rate has been in the 4+% growth category, providing a new hope for people that had lost their job, new hope for those that were coming out of the educational institutions to secure a good job and begin the process of building a family, buying a home, living the American dream. Yet in this recovery, from a recession that began in 2008, late 2007, with the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the bank failures, it was a deep recession. Yes, it was. And it's taken a considerable amount of time to get moving in the right direction. But clearly, after the last 7.5 years of the Obama administration, we have not begun to achieve the kind of recovery that has been the average of all recoveries since the end of World War II. We've been about half of that. And by being half of that, we simply have not been able to provide the opportunities for the kind of growth and the opportunities that come from that growth to the American people. Now, what we have seen here, I think can best be defined as failed policies by this administration. We have policies that have raised taxes significantly on the American people, even though their incomes haven't raised. We've had policies of overspending money here in Washington to the point where our national debt, based on years of deficit spending, has almost doubled from $10.7 trillion when this administration began to now over $19 trillion after their 7.5 years of governing and putting in place the policies that clearly have failed. You can come to no other conclusion, despite what the White House puts out. The American people know better, because they contrast what is said about things are really moving well, things are going well, we're on the march forward. They compare that with their situation, and there's no comparison to be made whatsoever. deficit spending, plunging into debt, overregulation, burdening innovators, burdening businesses from having the ability to expand their business, and overregulating, as I said, overtaxing, and clearly overspending. Those three policies are what drives economic growth. Now, I've had the great privilege of representing a state that has done just the opposite. That has, under Republican leadership, controlled spending, controlled regulations, and put innovative processes in place that have allowed our state to thrive and to grow. We came out of a deep deficit situation some years ago, but we have turned that around to the point where we now have a AAA credit rating. We went from deficit spending, which caused borrowing, to a surplus, well over $2 billion. And we've become a very attractive state to live in and to do business in. Let me state a couple of things here that have been said about our state. Chief Executive Magazine just recently named Indiana one of the top 5 states in the nation for business. The magazine asked 513 CEOs, chief executive officers, to rank the states they were familiar with on tax and regulatory regime, workforce quality, and living environment. Let me give you a couple of their quotes. Indiana has its act together and is impressive. Indiana has consistently ranked in the top 3 in offering not just competitive incentives for business, but also packages that improve the skill sets to hire a qualified, work-ready workforce. Don Brown, Chief Executive Officer of Indianapolis-based Interactive Intelligence, Inc., recently said that the state's low costs and low taxes allow job creators to invest more resources into their businesses and their employees. He went on to say, limited regulations make it easy to grow here, freeing up time, which is perhaps an entrepreneur's most coveted gift. We have great universities turning out lots of talented graduates. The public and private sectors work effectively together in an effort to improve conditions for everybody. Oh, how I wish I could attribute that quote that would reflect what's happening here in Washington. How I wish I could use that quote to say, this is what's happening across the United States. I wish I could use that quote to be able to stand here and say, under the direction of this president and the support of this Congress, we have reined in our overspending. We have tamped down our overregulation. We have put incentives in place to create jobs. We've put the policies in place that have created economic growth. Unfortunately, that is not the case, as has been made by my colleagues, and I'm trying to make now. The contrast between a geographic entity called a state and the federal government, and the policies which govern that state and govern our federal government. The contrast on those 3 areas of taxation, regulation, and spending is dramatic. Why wouldn't we look to the one that has succeeded? Why wouldn't we look to the policies implemented by a state that has exceeded and has provided dynamic economic growth over the past same time frame as the federal government, who has done just the exact opposite relative to taxation, regulation, and spending, and draw the clear conclusion that the policies that have been implemented by this administration have failed. Let's stop pointing fingers at what the motives are. Let's just look at the results. And the results are very clear. A stagnant national government, a stagnant growth throughout the United States, people not receiving opportunities to increase their income, which, by the way, over this 7.5 period of time, has decreased on an average of $3,000 per family. So if you go back to what the average earnings in America per family was, at the start of this administration, it was $3,000 higher than it is today. And so whatever releases come out of the White House or whatever the spokesman for the president says or the president himself says just simply doesn't match up to the facts. But the facts are related to the policies that either have been put in place or not put in place. And they're dramatically different at the federal level than they are at the state level. So it's clear in the remaining months of this administration, those policies are not going to change. Simply the denial of the fact that the country is not growing at a rate that provides opportunity for the future and gives us hope for the future. But we do have a model, and my state is not the only model. We have a model of states that have done just exactly the opposite. That have, yes, have regulations, but they're for safety and health, and they're beneficial and put in place and not trying to micromanage how businesses operate, that have been careful with the tax dollars that come in and the revenue that comes into the state and balance their fiscal budget on an annual basis, don't throw themselves ever deeper into debt, that recognize that is not the path to growth, and that spends taxpayers' money wisely. So overtaxation, overregulation, overspending clearly is not the path to economic growth. It's clear that the path is just the opposite of that. And so in the remaining months that I have here, I'm going to continue to keep talking about this. I hope my colleagues will pay attention and make decisions on the basis of the facts, not on the basis of ideology, not on the basis of what they've been told by an administration or by a president, but look at the results. And the results are dramatic in terms of application of the basic principles that stimulate economic growth, provide hope for the American people. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor.